Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobster, the father of disinformation. We are coming at you live from the Standard Coffee Shop / NDS Studios in Lady Lake, Florida. If you're ever in the area, you want some good coffee, drop by. You might see the boys. You might be able to hang. Before we get into today's show, a little reminder, sometime around the half-an-hour mark, we're going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Sign up there. Good news, guys. We've got all the hiccups ironed out. Vinny Paz couldn't take us down. Everything's good, man. Everything's golden. Vinny Paz could not keep down, and we're coming for you. We're gonna you, Vinny. No, that's not true. Patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Early access to episodes, ad-free viewing experiences, early access to tickets from Bohemian Grove, and discount codes off of merchandise from toplobsta.com. I have my moon map shirt on.
Oh, yeah, let's focus on that. That's
resurrected it because the other day I was in the chat of Steven Pokemon from AM Wake Up, and I was screaming at him like a madman about our moon map that he never returned our topographical map of the moon that we said he could borrow, not keep, and he's since just stopped talking to us.
Let that be fair warning to our guest today, Jay Dyer.
If we let you borrow something, dude, you got to give it back. We don't let people have things unless you ask nicely. Jay, before we get into the conversation, where can everybody find your work? What is you all about?
You can find my work at my website, mainly jaysanalysis.com. That has all the archive content going back about 10 years, all the lectures, interviews, deep dives on global elite text. And then you can find me on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube under my name, Jay Dyer. I'm all about the, also write for the Sam Hyde Show, and I host the fourth hour, or hosted the fourth hour of the Alex Jones Show the last 5 or 6 years. Don't know if I will be able to keep doing that, but I'm all about geopolitics, comedy, philosophy, film, and that's what I'm all about.
You know, you're a busy guy, Jay, and I appreciate you making some time for us. And we're here to talk about a very important subject, and that is whether or not Hitler was aggressively. But before we even get into that, we have to discuss.
Well, wait, I want to know what is going on with Alex Jones.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
Like, he's getting sued for billions of dollars. Infowars is dead, but then I look and I still see Infowars, and I see you there and all these guys. So what exactly is happening?
Yeah, so basically it's a long, drawn-out, court battle, and it's three different lawsuits. So I think they did finally learn that they won't be able to keep the studios. So Alex will continue to go. It's just that Infowars Studios will eventually be seized in the next 5 days to 2 weeks. Jeez. So it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided that they would not hear it. So they just struck it down as even worthy of hearing. So they didn't even look at it, but it did at least make it that far up. But people think that it's like, oh, how come it's not shut down yet? Well, court cases take years, so that's fine.
Right. It's a long process, a grueling process. And that sucks to hear, man, because obviously, he's built that over how long? We were talking to Matt in the coffee shop, and he was like, dude, I was listening to Alex Jones back when he was talking about Moloch, and he was breaking into Bohemian Grove. I'm so used to saying that now.
Freudian slip.
But yeah, man. But you can't stop Alex. You could take away his stuff, and you could take away maybe the area that he does it in, and yada yada. But you can't stop Alex Jones. So
let's be careful. Let's be really careful talking about the guy. I mean, I thought we were past that kind of stuff of like weird. I don't even want to talk about it.
All right.
I want to talk about it.
Well, look, I want to lay the groundwork for this because a lot of people are going to ask themselves, why are we talking about Hitler? And those people surely are not on Twitter. And so I want to kind of lay the groundwork and explain to people what has been developing over these last, I would say conservatively 2 years, but certainly more than that. And what's really gained a lot of traction in the last year is this sudden appreciation. And that's probably putting it mildly for Hitler. A lot of things have sort of come to light, things that we didn't understand about World War II. And that's led people to a lot of conclusions about the Nazis, about Hitler, and it's brought us to a really weird place culturally lately. And Jay, you found yourself kind of in the middle of these discussions. So if you could, can you talk to that a little bit? What's going on? Why are we talking about Hitler? Why are people suddenly thinking that he's based?
Yeah, well, I think Kanye had a huge role in kind of popularizing this from a memetic warfare perspective. 4chan played a role. So there's a lot of different outlets, I guess you could say, that kind of made this a talking point in the culture, probably a lot of meme warfare. And then the relaxing of the algorithm in the last couple of years to a degree, which seems to be very selective, has allowed for people to start uploading old speeches, etc., from Hitler, and AI speeches and all this. And so these reels and clips are just kind of going crazy. One reason for it is also the obvious point that Zionism has a huge level of control over our government, the lobby, APAC, all that. So there's some truth to the lockdown, the censorship, the things you can't talk about. But then what happens is that people tend to then think, oh, if I've been lied to, then everything's a lie, right? Oh, everything is an illusion. And so they get into these sort of really extreme polar opposition positions. And that's a tactic that I think the establishment knows, that humans are kind of creatures of extreme. So they'll go to the opposite pendulum swing, and then they'll adopt, oh, well, if Zionism is, has a huge influence in our government, then the polar opposite must be the solution. And there's a lot of different nuanced, points and takes that qualify a lot of this. And we're going to talk about that, I'm sure. But those are the reasons that I think it's popular. And then also, I would be suspicious of Silicon Valley suddenly allowing these things. And the counter narrative is, oh, well, they couldn't stop us. We broke containment. And it's like, I mean, they still censor people. So I'm not sure why you think that it's breaking containment. I would be very suspicious of that, especially since all the people who are the Silicon Valley elites that are subservient to people in the Middle East, are they really just allowing this because they can't stop it, or are they perhaps allowing it for a certain reason? And that's my concern. I don't know that for sure. I'm speculating. We had NAFO cybercom operations running wild in 2020 when the Russian, Ukraine conflict kicked off, and that kind of died down. So this might be a new angle on the NAFO operation, if you're familiar with that.
Do you think that the Nazi, this kind of like the Nazi rhetoric, is that the end all of whatever game that we're playing? Because it seems like this like a seesaw game that will go back and forth, that get us closer to whatever conclusion we are supposed to end up at. And when you do your research, I don't want to like bury the lead in all this, but when you check out the Nazis and you see what they were into, and you see how they were incorporated in this government, all the esoteric things that they were researching and developing, and then you also look at the concerted effort of the left to kind of they've made Nazis, they made saying that Nazism is bad almost like synonymous with the way that they've made the Bible look corny.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I know what you're getting at. It's this idea that they first overused it until the point where it lost its meaning. And then
if I say it, if I'm actually like, no, actually, wait a second, guys, these dudes were kind of doing some weird stuff.
Now you're a leftist.
And I feel almost embarrassed
yes,
saying
but
it.
for the other side, it's like when they, that I don't care about your booze, I've seen what makes you clap. And the left, who's become so despised and by the other side, calls you a Nazi. It's almost like a badge of honor now. So there's a lot of like cultural priming that led us to this. And I agree with what you're saying, this idea of like, the algorithms kind of softening up, and I'm highly suspicious of that, because I think it really takes place specifically on X or Twitter. And it seems to be at the hand of Elon Musk. I mean, this is something we talk about on the show a lot. But Top, you had this hyper viral tweet one time where you post a picture of Joe Biden looking all sleepy, and then you post a picture of Mel Gibson, and he looks jacked, and it says you could either drink adrenochrome, you can hate the Jays, which way, Western man? And Elon Musk actually comments on that post.
Right.
And he goes, wow, is Mel Gibson really that buff these days? Now, what we're led to believe, and that turns into a whole debacle. They write articles. Elon actually removes his own comment from that. But it was this really early signifier, in my opinion, that like, hey, we're allowed to talk about this.
It was the early Roman salute from Elon, and then all downhill from there.
But I think it's nefarious. I think that Elon has been putting his finger on the scale. When he bought Twitter, he bought the ability to affect culture on a high degree. And it seems to me that this is the culture that he was hoping to affect, or the direction that he was hoping to push us in.
Yeah, it could also be a way to keep tabs on everybody who is dissident and exactly what the numbers are, and give people the impression. I'm not saying that people shouldn't speak their mind, but um, that there were similar types of things going on at the time of Jade Helm. I don't know if you guys remember that, but that was a similar situation where the speculation ended up being that the reason that they admitted that they were doing all these continuity of government drills, this was back 2012, 13, somewhere in there, 14, was so they wanted to actually track what people were saying online about this idea of, civil unrest and government reaction programs and drills that were being done across multiple states for the possibility of like a civil war or imminent collapse. And of course, all the patriotard crowd thought, "Oh, they're coming. They're going to put us in the UN camps." And really, all it was tracking and seeing what the reactions of people were online in mass. So you have to understand that the military, the Pentagon, they watch and study all this very intently. And I don't think that anybody at that Silicon Valley level, they're not disconnected from that Pentagon, cybercom establishment. They're all tied into the same DARPA style, NSA style networks. Now, granted, there's probably a lot of people in those agencies that would agree and are opposed to the corruption of our system, but you still just can't trust these people. All these Silicon Valley elite people are pretty much known for being very backstabby and very, they'll ride the waves, you know what I mean? They'll ride trends. And that doesn't really tell us that they're genuine. They're just kind of riding waves. But the other thing I'll say on that too is that the memeing, which has been studied at a very high level, there was a study done like 10 years ago at GCHQ, which is the British version of the NSA, and they did a study on meme magic, talking about how you can speak to the collective unconscious through these archetypal imagery, symbols and whatnot. That's kind of a big part of what Changing Images of Man actually talks about in the later chapters, is engineering and co-opting cultural memes and archetypes and retooling them to give man a new worldview and a new paradigm. And so the reason I say that is that when you talk about Hitler, the meme now, according to many of the guys that called in, we did probably, I don't know, 15 hours of call-in spaces on this in the last several weeks. And just caller after caller, many of them note that the history doesn't even matter to them. It's just totally a symbol divorced from the reality. Remember the Sam Hyde meme, that Sam Hyde has done all the mass casualty events. And people ask Sam about that. And he's like, yeah, well, the meme actually took on a life of its own. It's like, it's not even connected to me anymore. And in the same way, it's a postmodern attitude to where you take a meme, divorce it from its history, and kind of give it your own narrative or your own story. So it's a postmodern will to power situation, which actually fits perfectly with Nazism. That's what Alfred Rosenberg did when he crafted the narrative of the Reich. He just kind of made it up wholesale and came up with these ideas like positive Christianity, which would get rid of all the Old Testament elements. It would be a kind of a Gnostic, Marcionite version of Christianity for the Reich. So that's what they're doing, the same thing that Rosenberg did. Today's tiny mustache man followers.
That's a really interesting point, because I can see there's like two schools of thought on this. It's like one of them is the database aspect, and they're looking for extremists, and this is for, somebody that's an alarmist would say when the Noahide laws finally start to be put into effect, they're going to come for you. They're going to have this backlog of every anti-Semitic thing that you've said. And here in Florida, we had DeSantis passing anti-Semitism laws and all these other things. But then there's this other side of me that looks and goes, I think the Nazi sympathizing is really the point, and that this doesn't end, with a persecution of people who are or anti-Semitic ideology, but that this ends in this resurrection in some way, shape, or form of a modern day Nazi movement. And the reason that I think that, it's interesting that you just said what you did, because I look at Operation Paperclip and I look at this time frame of like the late 40s, early 50s as being the epicenter for the development of so many programs that are
prevalent today.
And we're seeing kind of the fruits. Like you asked, is this the end all be all, right? That's what you said earlier, Top. And it's like, it kind of feels like we're in a little bit of an end game scenario from stuff that was developed way back then when we took a bunch of Nazis out of Germany through Operation Paperclip.
We're at the culmination of, we're at the culmination of what MK Ultra looked to achieve on like an individual basis. Now we're doing it nationwide, probably worldwide through, we're not going to say it here, And then shortly after, with like Uri Geller, and also with we've done a bunch of work with on Andrija Puharich, the alien phenomenon, that's also coming to culmination now. But that all started right at 47, 48. The implementation of it. All this stuff is happening right now. So I'm like, are we fulfilling the Nazi agenda? Because have these guys ever left? Have they been that deeply entrenched in our shadow government? Which way are we going?
Right. What do you think about that, Jay?
Oh,
I think you're muted. Muted or something.
Another angle on this, which is plausible, is the idea that since they, have been calling everybody Nazi for so long, they actually need to create that opposition. So you allow it to allow this to kind of build up, and then you've got, kind of an existing pseudo-organic movement. One example of this too would be prison gangs. If you think about the way the prisons are structured, and if you listen to all the interviews with people that have been in prisons and supermaxes and whatnot, I did a lot of podcasts with Sean Atwood over the years, and he's always telling his Arizona prison stories. We've done Sammy the Bull interviews, and he's got a bunch of those too. They talk about how it's very segregated and controlled in that way, when you kind of divide everybody up into the sort of tribal camps. And I'm not saying that people can't have a concern for their ethnicity and their people groups. That's healthy and that's natural. People should be self-determining. The problem is that when you do this in a polarizing, extreme way, you can use this as a technique to break down and destroy civilization. So I think that's the unfortunate situation that we're at, which they put all these pressures on the system on purpose to foment civil unrest with the Podesta plan and with shutting off my EBT snap cards, that kind of stuff. Which I'm going to be out. We'll be out in the streets next week, dog.
That's right. We actually, just for the audience, us and Jay are planning on robbing the local Walmart. And so if you guys are in the area and you're looking to join,
listen, guys, if you're not stealing,
by the way,
Walmart,
I'll be signing books as I rob the Walmart. If you guys want to come,
two birds, one stone.
Yeah, right.
Jay, go ahead.
This book talks about that. Is this whole idea of crafting a new image through giving people a new paradigm, allowing people to have a new paradigm. And I think you're right that I don't think that the Paperclip faction has totally run everything in our government. I think they were a minority faction. They were kind of shunted into the GOP for a while. They didn't have a lot of power and influence, but there is that faction that's there that has a very strict, eugenics policy. And I think you could look at this as an example of that, because all the people in this book, the writers of this, they're very influenced by Madame Blavatsky's theosophy, and her theosophy was influential on a lot of the SS, Reich type leaders like Himmler. She talks about the root races, and then the next, instantiation of a empire that would be the next root race that would evolve. And they kind of co-opted that and said, oh, that's the Teutonic Knights, the Germanic Teutonic Knights. And that's where you get into the occult side of this, which you mentioned Werner von Braun, I think, and Paperclip. And some of those guys were into the occult. But, Himmler explicitly thought he could do this sort of ritual reenactment at different castles in Germany. So he actually was an occultist. I don't know that they all were. I'm not really seeing any significant evidence that Hitler himself was an occultist. There might be evidence of that. But I mean, there's enough in Mein Kampf, if you've read it, that obviously it's not Christian. It should be obvious.
That's an interesting thing that's emerged out of this, is this idea that Hitler himself was Christian, or that he had this sympathy for Christianity or Christ himself. Earlier you said that it's a natural thing for an individual to align across racial lines and things.
Well, what were the reasons why you'd say that he's not a Christian that you've noticed?
Well, I don't want to bury the lead on that, because that's, I think, is the real meat of the discussion that I want to have today, because I kind of wanted to try to dispel this whole Hitler admiration and really highlight who he was and what he believed. But before we go there, I'm interested in the sort of the lead up to this cultural phenomenon that we find ourselves in now. You said that it's natural to sort of align one along their own racial lines, right? That's a natural thing and there's nothing wrong with that. But that when it's kind of orchestrated within these extreme circumstances, it results in really terrible things. Do you think that the suppression of that natural urge, that natural inclination, was organic? Because whether or not it was organic or orchestrated, we certainly did go through that, right? Let's say white people, for example, it is, you can't express any sort of white power or white alignment it's very problematic to do that. It's okay for other races to do that, but then you see this sort of weaponization against white people where it's like white people cannot be the recipients or the victims of racism, let's say. And they change the definitions of racism. There's a lot of changing the definitions, changing the language around things in order to justify and also, I think, make it so that a baseline conversation about the fundamentals that we're operating in can't happen. If you change the definitions of everything, then we simply can't have a discussion because now we're just arguing about what these words mean, at their root. So from my perspective, it looks like that was part of this. You had to go through that in order to get to this. What do you think, Jay? Is that an organic thing, or is this just a byproduct? Is this a byproduct of an organic event, or was that an orchestrated thing?
No, it's absolutely orchestrated. In fact, I read the Practical Idealism by Count Kalergi, and Kalergi's book was presented to the Royal Society Atlanticist establishment. They said, yes, we'll use this in concert with Lionel Curtis's plan for a kind of a socialist federation approach to how we would run the West. So when you look at Canada and when you look at the UK, they're really just about 20 years ahead of us in this exact same plan that they have for us in all the West. And that includes the weapons of mass migration, open demographic warfare side of it, which proves partly what you're arguing here, what you're asking about. The demographic warfare is 100% real. Kalergi's book says that we will basically create a giant homunculus blob of people, and there will only be a how does he put it, a Middle Eastern people supremacy. He says that in the book. Yeah. So that was presented. They said, yeah, we'll go with this plan. They combined it with other sort of more Fabian socialist models of how to integrate the West. And so you have to understand Fabian socialism in tandem with this, because all the Fabian socialist elite said, we got to get rid of the Western white male, especially the Christian white male. He's the number one enemy. Bernard Shaw, Bertrand Russell, they all said this. And they said for the UK and Europe, import Islam. For the US, import from south of the border. So they're very explicit when you read these texts. You're not supposed to read these texts. You're not supposed to talk about these texts. They're all public. You can find the PDFs on, archive.org. So it's all very real. That's one side of it. And then you're talking about, to what degree all that was organic. It was 100% planned and strategized to inculcate critical race theory, DEI, all the anti-white stuff throughout the education system. In fact, I was told in grad school, because I wanted to go on and get my PhD, one of my graduate advisors, my history professor advisor, said, I'm going to just go ahead and tell you that you're a straight white male. You're not going to be welcomed in graduate academia. He was just
was he giving you a forewarning, or was he saying like this in his own opinion, like he thought it was justified?
No, he was just saying the realities in the late 2000s of higher level academia. And I'm just using that as a test case, right? Of the purposeful, intentional decision to denigrate and not want in higher level graduate academia straight white males, especially in the humanities, right? I mean, it might not be the same if you're going into STEM stuff and engineering, computers or whatever, but for humanities like philosophy and that kind of stuff, which is what I was studying in literature and history, no, of course they don't. They're very explicit about that. So he himself was a white male. I'm not sure he was actually straight. So that might have been why teacher. That might have been why he was able to get his PhD. He had to, touch a few butts or something.
You messed up, Jay. Let me ask you something real quick.
I just left. I'm not touching.
Not touching.
Now people can touch my butts, but I'm not touching.
Because that's open permission for the audience who's listening.
No,
and
that
remember
is
that
not.
When we have Jay here in the studio,
that cost extra. Actually, we discussed this pre-show. I want to ask you something. It's a slight departure. You mentioned
one butt coin, not Bitcoin. One butt coin.
How much is a butt coin worth these days?
It's equal to one Bitcoin. So
you mentioned the Muslim supremacy idea, and this is the thing that I argue with my mother about constantly, because she's like, "Have you seen these? Look at what they're doing. They're taking over, yada, yada." And I'm just kind of I look at it and I'm like, they're not really somebody that I understand the plan. I'm not so concerned with them per se, because I think that they're just like manufactured. They seem like a tool of something else. Certainly is happening. But what do you make of the propaganda around it that's been ramped up? Like a lot of this anti-Muslim propaganda feels like 2001, 2002.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It feels like 9/11.
It makes me a little worried because after that we did a 20-year war. What are you seeing from your side of things on that end?
That's a great question. This is really complex because there's truth and lies mixed up in that, right? Because I still believe, in that the Big 9 event is not what we were told. So when you understand kind of the real history of the Mujahideen and bin Laden and all that, which I just lectured through a couple books on that recently on my channel, if you want to go deep into the history and like the CIA relationship between them, Mossad as well, by the way, it's not just the CIA, but they just recently admitted very openly, very candidly that Jolani was an ally to the CIA in Timber Sycamore, especially all the way up until the overthrow of Assad. That was all done at the behest of the CIA and Mossad working in tandem. And they welcomed Jolani, formerly head of Al-Qaeda or al-Nusra in Syria. Now he's a hero. Again, going back to that long-term partnership between the Mujahideen and the CIA, that's still in play today. And it's very transparent when you actually kind of read about it. So on the one hand, I can be nuanced and say, no, I don't accept the official story of the Big 9 event. And what we were told about the threat of Islam was a lie. However, the mass importation of these people is the real story. That's the real threat, not because of supposed terror cells everywhere, but because of the demographic warfare. And the Islamic stuff was more pronounced in the UK and in Europe than it is here. And I've been to London. I've seen it firsthand. Like my wife went to London in 2003 or 4, and then we went and I gave a lecture in 2019, and she was describing just how radically, Islamicized it was. So I don't think it's so much the threat of the, bombs going off or whatever. And a lot of those are provocateur, entrapment operations, especially like the, Christmas bomber, the shoe bomber, all that stuff. So that is a controlled narrative, I think. But the real concern is the demographic replacement. And although, as I said, that was primarily Islam in the UK and in Europe, I'm starting to see more and more Islamic replacement and importation in the West. For example, in Nashville, we had a huge importation of Somalis and Muslims in the last 10 years, which never even seen that in Nashville before. Now you see mosques everywhere going up. And you can look into Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia this was in Max Blumenthal's book, who's a big, critic of the official narratives. And he's a socialist, so I have plenty of criticisms of him. But his book on the real use of Islam in the West is pretty good. Management of Savagery. At least the first half of the book's really good. But he points out that the last 20 years, the Saudis have put billions, something like tens of billions of dollars into Islamic centers, Islamic education, and building mosques throughout America. That's all by design. That's when you see these blonde chick influencers constantly talking about the Quran, dude, that's all paid for. I'm convinced of that. So it's a real thing, but it's not the terror thing like they say, but it's a demographic thing. That's my take on it. And everybody has to read the Milner Fabian conspiracy book. It's so good because it's not just about, oh, you won't talk about, you just talk about the Fabians. No, it's all the same thing. And they work together with the anti-white crowd because all the Fabians were anti-white, and utopian socialism that Moses Hess is the father of. It's the same thing as Fabian socialism. They're the same. It's the same as Bolshevism. It's just different strategies about how to roll it out. So, and they're very candid about how to use Islam as a tool. Many people call it the broom of Zionism or the broom of Judaism, and that's the best way to put it. And they're both Talmudic. If you watch my long talk with the Hodge twins, as soon as I got there, they were like, "You think Islam based? Is Islam based?" I'm like, "No, it's not based. What are you talking about? Child brides? How's that based? You don't think Islam based? You don't think Islam based?"
They can't help because they've been to jail, so it's
That's what happens. You go to jail, you come out, you're Muslim.
Oh.
Look, there it is. Oh, wow,
shit,
Nancy. Literally the 30-minute mark. She didn't waste a second, guys. You know what that sound
chat.
means.
Yeah,
shout out to Charles for the $3.33 donation. He says Tower Gang for life.
I'm sorry, Jay. This is very disrespectful. Our producer, that we have to kick the
she's
horse
got
out.
a job, dude. She knows what it is. She doesn't like.
Nancy is the broom of Nephilim Death Squad.
She's the broom of getting rid of the white Aryan guy on your
No,
show,
she's
right?
got to get rid of these pores, these
No,
filthy
you can
pores
stay,
who are
Jay.
watching. Guys, if you want to continue watching, patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Otherwise, give it a week or so, and this episode will release
All right,
in its
cut
entirety.
the music. Get these guys out of here.
It'll be a little bit censored on YouTube for certain words, because we don't want to trip that algorithm and have the take us out. All right, so
The Fabians.
The Fabians, my mistake. I want to talk about this idea a little bit about the southern border, the porous southern border, the legislation that got us there, but I think the cultural leveraging that got us, or the cultural manipulation, it seems to me like we were kind of dog walked down this path to create this porous southern border situation so that it could result in exactly what you're describing here, Jay. And now we find ourselves in this place where it's not even just the left. Like, a lot of people are really upset about the whole ICE thing and people getting deported. And, apparently things are getting messy. Some people who are actually legal citizens are allegedly getting deported. I don't know how much truth is to that. But what's clear is the consensus that's created is one of like, oh my God, this is horrific. What about and I think that emotional ploy, by the way, of like, what about the families? What about the individuals? What about the children and their parents and all this other stuff was exactly the same emotional leverage that got us here in the first place. They manipulated low information, high emotion voters into voting for the very scenario that we find ourselves in. Is this what happened? And does this it looks to me like it does play directly into what you're describing?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're spot on. Are we off of YouTube? Like, we can be more candid now?
Yeah, dude, say whatever you want. You can
Okay,
get all
cool.
the racial
Yeah.
slurs out.
Did you guys see that clip of Arnold at the climate change event when the Pope was blessing the ice cube?
Schwarzenegger?
Yeah.
No, I didn't see that. What is that?
Oh,
Maybe
dude,
we
you
can
got to
pull
see
that up.
this because, believe it or not, Arnold was like the greatest expositor of how the propaganda that you're talking about works. And it's a great clip. I'll send it to you guys. He says, I don't know if he came on after the Pope or before the Pope, but he gets up and he goes, he says, forgive my shitty impersonation of Arnold, but I have to do it. It's too fun not to do it. He says, we couldn't convince anyone of the climate, the problem with climate. And then what we did, we took the child and we put the gas mask on the child, and he couldn't breathe, and he couldn't breathe, and then everyone believed in the climate. And so
that's pretty good.
We got a kid in a gas mask to breathe, and then it pulled on the heartstrings, and then everybody believes in climate change. So he's admitting it's lies. And that's exactly what they do with, remember that the AOC's going down there because Trump's putting kids in cages, and everybody fell for that.
Yeah, and she's like crying at the cage, right at the fence and everything. It's all so when I see these things, was that it? Was that
eyes to see you? Eyes to see you.
When I see those things, man, these appeals to emotion, especially using children. I mean, I know it kind of sounds like cold, but it's like as soon as you start waving children in front of me,
I stop caring.
It's not that I stop caring, but I become highly skeptical because I recognize this is an emotional leverage that you're trying to roll out.
You're just gonna go hat off.
You remember the
I don't know. I want to go hat off, but I'm looking at my
not
hair
a great look.
well, Jay's got cool hair, dude, and I can't.
Yeah.
I gotta get this going. Please, Jay, continue while I fix.
Remember the Gulf War thing with the Egyptian ambassador's daughter, and the GOP brought her in as like they tried to say that she was. She wasn't even there in Saddam's, incubator factories.
Yeah.
Incubators. That was, again, child propaganda. When they were trying to overthrow Assad back in the day, I remember like 2014, we were 15, we were writing articles about Dusty Boy. And that was this picture of a Dusty Boy child that had dust all over him. And Assad had done this to his own people. And all of that was just fake ass propaganda. So, yeah, man, that's how it works. It's anytime you see that kind of child propaganda rolling out, and they did the same thing with Greta, right? They rolled Greta out as like, we must all listen to the child, when she's, how dare you? How dare you?
Yeah.
That's just the most basic retard level propaganda, but that works, dude.
It does. Well, okay, I want to go someplace with this, and I know it's a joke and it's a meme, but I want to have a serious discussion about it. This idea of like repeal the 19th has become a meme, and it's like before everybody recoils, I want to say like, women men deal with systems and logic and things of that nature. Women are typically emotional, empathetic, and nurturing, right? And so when you have all of these women voting, and you wonder, well, who are these low information, high emotion voters, the ones that are susceptible to narratives like children in cages and separating mothers from children at the border and things like that. Am I wrong in saying that it is predominantly women, male feminists, and women who are falling for this sort of thing? And then these people go out into the world and they affect legislation, they affect American politics, and they create the very thing that now they find themselves, crying about because ICE is out in force and it's doing all these things. And it seems to be lost on many of them that, like, this thing that has resulted in this, and you could say what you want about ICE, and I think that this was an orchestrated thing to get to this point, maybe get some of these cities under martial law, who knows what we'll see. But this is like, you have mass amounts of military-aged men who are displaced, who have no jobs. Many of them are saying things like, we were promised jobs and homes if we came over here. Who's doing the promising? I don't know.
It's like a complete landmine. Like where I came from in Brooklyn, I used to live in a place called Garrison Beach, and they filled this field up with migrant tents. And all it takes is for you to cut the funding to them, which I like, cut federal SNAP funding or whatever they're giving them. And it's like it's a literal landmine. It's just pulling the pin on a grenade.
It's a time bomb.
Yeah, it's genius.
It is genius. But these women that are crying about it, and I just say that because you see predominantly women like in tears talking about this thing, AOC at the cages and everything. And it's like, dude, you got to drop the emotion. That sort of behavior is exactly what led to this being, possible in the first place. And when you have this big of a mess, and you have to, release ICE, it's going to be messy. It's not going to be like this clean. Like, good people, normal people are going to get wrapped up in this, and it's going to be horrifying. But it's like, I don't see they need to go. They need to go. So I don't know, this whole repeal the 19th thing. It's like, if they're so easily manipulated, should they be able to vote? Is that a crazy question?
Things there. So first of all, the Changing Image of Man book, for example, backs up what you're saying, because they were saying in 1982 they would have to do everything they could to emasculate the men in the West. So that is everything from putting soy in everything to toxic food and water, soy slop that we all eat, fake food, to the cultural engineering, the brainwashing in the schools to make young boys feel bad about being boys. All of that's part of this plan to allow the country to move into this sort of quasi-socialist or socialist technocratic scenario. So the more that you can get people thinking that they're going to be on the dole with universal basic income, which is like a 100-year-old plan. H.G. Wells writes about that. Bertrand Russell wrote about it. You got technocrats 100 years ago saying that that's the plan. I think a good scenario for that is an economic collapse, right? But you're right too, that when you bring all these people in with all these promises and then there's nothing, that's a recipe for planned, agitation and civil unrest. And I think that the more they try to polarize people with a lot of this propaganda, I think what they want is an eventual clash of some kind, and then perhaps a disintegration of the West. A lot of books, a lot of writers have been saying that, because you got to get rid of the existing system and bring in the new system. And the best way that they typically do that is through blowing up the old system. How exactly that'll happen, I don't know. I know the dollar will eventually die. I don't think there's anything behind the fiat currency that's going to eventually just dwindle away. All fiat currencies eventually die. So you combine economic with the cultural chaos, with the importation of all these, people that don't integrate, whatever that means. It's a recipe for collapse and disaster. And what was it? That last question was about, the women voting. I mean,
taking
voting
away
itself,
their right to vote.
Yeah, voting as itself is a scam, and it always has been, in my view. So I don't really think that. I think that's more of a politicized issue, that people think they have this right and that they have all this power through voting. I think only at a local level does voting actually do anything. So although I do not think that if that's the origins of feminism is suffrage. The whole feminist movement comes out of that. So the whole idea itself is kind of retarded, because women aren't meant to be primarily involved in the political and economic business sphere. That doesn't mean they can't have their own, side mom hustles or whatever. But like Proverbs 31 woman, okay, yeah, but like that's not everybody being a boss bitch CEO, right? That's
it. So it's like, we can have moms with side hustles if you have like a crocheting thing, or you're knitting and you want to sell that, or you want to sell
stores only,
but no girl bossing. We're done with girl bossing, and I agree with that.
The woman didn't even want this in like, I think it was like 1918 or something. Yeah, it's like, But when Woodrow Wilson saw that there would be like a sizable movement that moved to his side, then the propaganda started to go towards that, and there you go. They kind of got forced upon it.
Next
and
thing you
now,
know, you get
here we
2
are.
taxable incomes. State gets to raise your kid. This is good for the propaganda machine.
Now we're full blown OnlyFans.
One thing, by the way, real quick, I don't mean to cut you off. Just one last point on this that I think nobody ever touches on hardly is there's this great psychology paper called Virtuous, Victimhood, and the Dark Triad Traits. And it's about, they did a study on, you don't even have to read the whole study, just read the first 5 pages of it, kind of summarizes the whole thing. They did a study on in societies based around emotions and egalitarianism or equalitarianism. What happens is it eventually becomes obsessed with everybody having to feel good. And so the only thing that gets promoted or the only thing that gets people ahead is the people who can capitalize on being oppressed. And that's why this whole system is focused around oppression dynamics and whoever can prove or try to argue or pretend to be the most oppressed. And Changing Images of Man, for example, says we're going to raise women to all these positions of power, not because they care about women, but because it will be a better means of moving the society into this socialist shithole that we're going into. And so they intentionally raise the minorities, and women are part of the minorities, but it also is all the other flavors of the rainbow people groups that are out there. They raise them and give them a narrative. And what happens in that scenario isn't that everybody gets like built up in some sort of equalitarian stuff. What happens is that the most cunning people that are narcissistic, psychopathic creeps, hence the dark triad traits, they actually figure out how to capitalize on the oppression dynamic, and they like compete to be the most oppressed to get the most social attention, social traction, energy, etc., focus, attention, and money. And it actually hurts the people who are actually oppressed. So it's a total like nightmare scam system. And when you look back at like the Bolshevik or the Soviet or the communist regimes, it's exactly how they function. So they function the exact same way. And you have to keep in mind that when it's voting or any of this stuff, like the CIA has mastered regime change in other countries. They know absolutely perfectly how to target through stages of revolution. You can look at something like Greg Pallas's famous classic piece on the IMF shock doctrine of the IMF revolution, how they stage these. The bankers know how to stage these in phases. And rigging the voting, for example, is part of how they do that in other countries. They started all the way back in, the removal of Mossadegh. I did a whole podcast on the CIA operations in Iran to remove Mossadegh with the Shah in, and it includes manipulating the voting system. So voting can be integrated into this overall color revolution regime change operation. And I don't know exactly how they're going to do it, but I think in the US, we are in a slower rollout of a regime change operation. I don't mean to get rid of Trump. I'm talking about like to totally change the country.
Yeah. You said that places like Canada are like 20 years ahead of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I would agree with that, but it is like a slow roll. We're going through like really slow phases, so slow that it almost can appear to the average person to be organic. And unless you're really paying attention or you're as well read as you are, I'm nowhere near.
I think that's the idea of it. Like,
well, it has to look. It's a frog getting boiled, right?
Yeah, it's so crazy because people like us, it's kind of our job to pay attention to these things. And when I'm, I think my mom was like, "Well, Trump is so bad," and I'm like, I gotta like kind of defend or at least give arguments for like something about this, like why you're wrong from a correct standpoint. And I can't even really remember past the last 6 months because it's been such a weird slow boil of event after event.
Yeah,
that it's like there are so many things. So much proof in front of your face. If you don't see it now, I don't even know how to put these events together for you.
They've done a masterful job of creating like these separate realities, these
right.
sort of like, little reality echo chambers that you can subscribe to and live in. And you can see the world through this lens. And to be fair, to give the other side or whatever other side, but I don't believe in, aligning yourself along political lines, but if you were to be, let's say, leftist and you were to look at things through their lens, it can adapt and it can it would make sense. The things around you would make sense through that lens enough that you would feel comfortable staying there. And it's the same thing for the right. Like if you're conservative or anything, and you're there and you look through that lens, it's going to be the same thing. So they've done a really great job of creating these these sort of like silos or you know little what would you call it? What do you put sheep into?
Like an echo chambers.
How you know where it's like we
like
can have these
compartmentalized
realities.
pens. Yeah, stables.
Yes,
Compartmentalized
and
stables.
it's wild that they've done it to the degree that they have. And I agree with you. We are like in what would be I forgot who coined the term, but the idea of like oppression Olympics, and that's your currency. You know, in these times is how oppressed you are. And I know we've seen a lot of comedy make fun of that sort of thing, but it's true.
But now we're like eclipsing that to a certain point, and we're reaching this. All right, so here's a weird example. I went to an event for my wife's job.
My wife.
They wanted all the men to dress like homosexuals.
That's right. They wanted them to dress in all white.
All white cocktail party. I said, I certainly will not. No offense, Jay. Beautiful blazer, but I'm like, I'm going to wear black pants at least. I can't need. It's cream.
It's cream. Yeah.
It's cream.
I mean, I know I called it a jacket, but I was like kidding.
Well, I mean, it's a beautiful jacket, and I don't think there's anything wrong
with it.
Well,
here's the problem.
It's a Don Johnson jacket. That's what's supposed to be.
Everybody calm down. So they want us to dress this, which is very nice. It's fine. But the first thing that they do is they call out some guy from like the Pacific Islands, and he's doing like the haka, which I'm extremely aware that I'm like, you are summoning your ancient entities, and this is the entity of war, actually. And you're in America, and you're yelling at me, going and swinging this thing, and all the white women. I'm like, isn't this so
it's
great?
Funny because what you pointed out is it was like they demasculated.
They asked me to first. You asked me, I absolutely will not. I said, Jay, I'm wearing dark pants at least. You're not going to see any. There's no bulges here, baby.
Yeah, you're not going to see dick outline.
We're keeping it nice and you know, it's going to be kosher.
Yeah.
And then you have a guy come in and try to demasculate me, and I'm like, yeah, this is like 1 + 1, and they've done it subconsciously, and the result of that made me almost feel like, you know what, Hitler, right? As I'm watching the guy, I'm like, wouldn't be such a bad idea.
You want me to show up in all white? I'm going to show up in an SS uniform.
That's the logical
Hugo
conclusion.
Boss. Yeah.
Even though I know better.
Yeah, that's a really funny thing, though. Emasculate the men, and then have the alpha male who's summoning his ancestors.
He's got no shirt on, and he's just yelling at me.
I love it.
I'm like, dude, there's just no way.
That's very funny.
Like, I got a gun on me right now. There's no way, right? Yeah, I know.
I don't know. It's when you see these sorts of things, and you can see it, you know, really on display in women's entertainment. That's something that I talk about a lot. These archetypes, these kind of like the couple, the kid with the two fathers, or the lovable character, they really only exist. And this is the same thing we're talking about the voting system and whether or not, you know, it's low information, high emotional voters that are voting for a southern border that's porous. All the ideology is also fed in through women. You know what I mean? So it's like when you look at women's
but all
media,
it's done is aggravated young men.
Yes, and so this whole Hitler appreciation, and I think this is probably a good segue, then this Hitler appreciation is born out of a disdain for this culture that we've been subjected to for some time. Somebody says that it's Nancy.
He goes, you know what, Hitler? I mean, don't use that.
You know what,
word.
Hitler? Yeah. So let's get into this conversation. This is really what I wanted to discuss. This mischaracterization of Hitler by culture right now on X, whether it's the Groypers or whatever, and how they have this caricature of Hitler, who he is, this idol of theirs, really is what he's become. What are they claiming Hitler is, and what was he really? What are the ways in which we're missing the mark here?
Oh, you're muted, buddy.
When I touched that microphone, it mutes. So yeah, so the claim is that because they figured out in 1930s Germany that, you know, Jewish banking elites and industrialists had deracinated and bankrupted the Weimar Republic.
A shout out, by the way, Jay, to Europa, right? I mean, Europa is like a huge part of that. That documentary to me is very suspect. I was watching it. It's 10 hours of MK Ultraing you on Weimar and the Bolsheviks and Trotsky and all these different things. And then, you know, by the end of it, you're left with this glowing reverence for Hitler.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting timing for that to come out. But I think maybe there was, I can't remember if that's the documentary. There was one that was going around like even 10 years ago. It might be a different documentary, or I can't remember. But Yeah, I
I
mean,
think it was the same one, but it just
okay.
like experienced this
They like,
resurgence.
yeah, okay. The idea is, okay, we've got a guy who's going to stand up against the banking elite, and he's going to, rid Europe to save white people of these, toxic elements of usury and international finance and all that. And I mean, I remember back in like 2006 and 7, I started reading pretty heavily about stuff. I read books exposing the Talmud, and I was like, well, maybe I should check out, see what, Tiny Mustache Man says himself. So I bought Mein Kampf. I read most of it, a good portion of it. I read all of David Duke's My Awakening. I read all of Francis Parker Yockey's Imperium. It's like all 700 pages of that. Read Spangler. So I read Evola. I read a lot of these sort of far right peoples, and found areas where I agreed and disagreed. But I noticed pretty quickly, even when I was less interested in Christianity back at that time, that you know there's not really much Christianity in Mein Kampf, for example. If you read through it, he will talk about the the dangers of international usury, international Freemasonry, international Zionism, all those things that I would agree critiquing. But then the solution is we need to revive this kind of a pagan imperium, right? That's ultimately, I think, what it ends up being. People debate whether Hitler was a agnostic or had some sort of a loose kind of perennialist idea about who God was, or kind of a syncretist idea. I think if we look at the influences, you have uh, Baron von Sebetendorf, the Thule Society, Theosophy. Those are all very esoteric and sort of Gnostic branches of occult philosophy and Eastern Hindu influenced philosophy that had quite a bit of influence on, at least we know for sure, like I said, Himmler and Rosenberg, but perhaps Hitler as well, because you'll find these elements within Mein Kampf where he says things like the real original sin is race mixing. And I mean, whatever you think about that, that's not what original sin is in the book of Genesis, right? He says things like Christianity is too intolerant of the other religions, for example, pagan religions and pagan altars. And so, because it has this desire to get rid of the pagan altars and to set up Christian altars, he says that's too Judaic. So, there's very much an influence of the higher critical school of Julius Wellhausen and these, I don't know if you know what the documenter hypothesis is, but that's where you get JEPD, which is taught in all the liberal seminaries and universities, that the Bible isn't really inspired. It's just kind of written by these different the priest class, the Yahweh's class, the Elohim class, the Deuteronomist class of ancient, and so the Bible's all kind of just pieced together, varying traditions. There's not a cohesive single theology that unites the Old and the New Testament. That higher critical approach of Julius Wellhausen, he himself was just a liberal German. He said, we have to get rid of all the Judaic elements within Christianity. Well, when you get to Hitler, and especially in elements of Mein Kampf, and when you get to Rosenberg, they're very explicit that, yeah, let's purge the Reich's Christianity. We'll have positive Christianity. It'll be amenable to the Reich. We can have some of the pagans, and you can have positive Christianity, but whatever is Judaic Christianity has to be gotten rid of. But that's really, I mean, you can't have Jesus without the Old Testament. You can't have, he's the Lamb of God. What does that mean? Well, if I don't know what Passover is in Exodus, I'm not going to know what the Lamb of God is. So it's a revival of an ancient heresy called Marcionism or Gnosticism, which says the God of the Old Testament is this other kind of God, and then Jesus can kind of be crafted into, a symbol or an image of an amenable philosophy to the Reich. So, as an Orthodox Christian, I don't have a problem with Christian nations and Christian imperium. That's the old Byzantine Orthodox Christian view, but it's not crafted to biological determinism. And I think that's one of the key elements where I would disagree with that whole perspective, is that Hitlerianism and the Teutonic perspective or whatever is this idea that blood and soil is kind of the root of the religion. That's political, but it politicizes the religion to make it a tool of the empire. Whereas in Orthodox Christianity, the empire has to confess one faith, and we don't put politics first. We put politics downstream of theology.
When you look at Hitler and especially the admiration surrounding him today, there's a lot of like shallow kind of takes where, people will say things like Hitler was Christian or Hitler was Catholic or he was Catholic adjacent because he did that overlap with the church.
Well, can I just say something? Because you said something at the very beginning of this, and it's a theory that kind of just popped up. I think Justin and Prometheus Lens, he's been floating it about the idea that Eve partook in some sort of sexual deviancy with the serpent in the garden, which is what got her kicked out. And when you said that about Hitler saying the original sin is race mixing, for some reason that just kind of like struck me. Do you know if he believed that? Like, did he think that?
No,
that was
that's you tend to see that in Christian identity movements, and believe it or not, that's actually from Kabbalistic texts. That's more of like a Jewish. I think it's in the Zohar, but that comes out of the Talmud. It's nothing to do with the actual biblical text, and they try to come up with this idea in the Christian identity circles, which is a bunch of feds that. When Jesus said, you know, you're of your father the devil, that's an actual literal seed that Satan spawned his offspring, who are the modern Jews and all that. But no, that has nothing to do with it's a spiritual seed. So everybody who's born of Adam is a spiritual son of the devil, and that's why baptism makes you a son of God in our view. So you have to be integrated into the covenant to no longer be a spiritual son of the devil. It's not anything to do with biological offspring per se, but you can find that in Judaic mysticism in terms of Lilith and the Kabbalah. So what Hitler is doing is kind of taking some of the Judaic approaches from the Talmud and kind of giving it more of a Teutonic bent of his own. But I didn't detect anything in, just because Hitler's tolerant of Christianity, you know, in his book, in Mein Kampf or whatever, that doesn't mean that he's actually Christian. You know what I mean? It's like you can have, there's plenty of world leaders that are pagans that are tolerant of Christianity. That doesn't make you a Christian. I've never seen any evidence that he was Catholic. Just because they had certain geopolitical alliances with the papacy for certain specific events, that doesn't mean that he was a Catholic.
It's funny because the idea that he had issues with Christianity because it was intolerant of other religions is like, you know, the way that I understand things is these pagan pantheons. You know, I subscribe more, maybe like a Gary Wayne kind of an idea where like these entities that these pagans are worshiping, and you know, you name them, it doesn't matter which one, are real spiritual entities, but their nature is horribly misunderstood by the people that are worshiping them. These are either the fallen angels themselves, or you know, disembodied spirits of their offspring, or what have you. But they're all in alignment with this spirit of rebellion, and so it's kind of a no Sherlock. When you say like, oh, Christianity isn't tolerant of these pagan ideologies, it's like, yeah, I mean, if you wanted to put it in rudimentary terms, it's because the things that they're worshiping are demonic in their very nature. And so obviously,
by the way, we actually have a good person here to ask this question too, because I've asked almost everybody, but David just got baptized on Sunday. What does that mean, in your opinion, in the Orthodox tradition? What does that mean, and why should we do it?
Yeah, I mean, in Orthodox Christianity, we would look at Acts 2, 38, 39, where Peter says, repent, be baptized for the remission of sins. And immediately after that, they have an actual, water baptism. Titus 3 says that it's the washing of the laver of regeneration. For us, the laver is the font. All the early churches in terms of their architecture had, full on baptismal fonts where people would be baptized into the triune God. Jesus says, be baptized in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So we would see that as a Trinitarian confession. And that's what puts you into covenant with God. Galatians 3 talks about those that are in Christ are those that are the seed of Abraham. So the promises to the, especially Genesis 12, 15, 17, 22, those Abrahamic covenant promises are expanded to the Gentiles when the Messiah came. And instead of circumcision, which was a bloody sort of primitive rite, God instituted baptism for the nations, because that's a much easier, simpler means of coming into the covenant than just males only being, having their foreskin removed, which is, by the way, is a sign of original sin. That's the purpose of it. Paul says in Colossians that baptism is the reality that replaces the symbology and the typology of circumcision. So circumcision was a type, and baptism is the reality which fulfills the type. So we don't believe that baptism is merely a symbolic ritual, but that it actually affects the thing that is happening, because the Old Testament rituals and rites were symbolic, and the New Testament rites that Jesus institutes actually bring about that change. So that's the Orthodox view.
Dude, I'm pumped that it's water baptism and not circumcision. I mean, 35 years old, if they were going to put me in front of the church like recovery. That and snip off my foreskin, that would have been rough. So I wonder your thoughts on this, because I have this theory that a lot of what was happening, the iconography surrounding Hitler in particular, was that of a particular entity. All right. And I know like Himmler was into whatever he was into. And there's all this idea of like, these Germanic tribes, right. These Germanic pagan tribes, and then right. Aryans. And if you look at Blavatsky's beliefs on what Aryans were, it gets even stranger. Right. And I look around at all the iconography surrounding Hitler, and it looks to be that of specifically Zeus. I mean, you have the Zeppelin Tribune Fairgrounds, or Tribune Grounds. I think I add the word fair in there, where he's giving his speeches from. Some of his most, iconic based Hitler speeches are given from this fairground, and it's designed after the Temple of Zeus that's found in Turkey. Turkey being, modern day Turkey being ancient Pergamum. Is it Pergamum? And this temple is brought to the Berlin Museum, and when Hitler hires this guy, I forget what his name is, to design, the guy goes to the Berlin Museum and he takes, all of his inspiration from the Temple of Zeus. And I think they even moved, there's rumors that they moved stones from it and incorporated them into the build. So he's giving his speeches from the Temple of Zeus, some homage to it, maybe some parts of it are still there. The eagle being associated with Zeus, it's like the number one animal. I mean, Zeus transmuted himself into a number of things. I think a goose or a swan was one of them, where he, raped some chick as a bird. But an eagle was one of the most associated animals with Zeus. And then, of course, you have light bolts. So you're talking about the SS uniforms, the eagle, the lightning bolts. I'm looking at all of this and I'm going, this is not a guy who has, what would you call it? Christian adjacent worldviews or ideology. This is a guy who is steeped in paganism. I guess the only question would be, is Hitler an unknowing participant in this sort of pagan theater that he's surrounded by, while his, constituents are engaging in all this occult practice, and, you have never-ending amounts of unconfirmable but still compelling conspiracy theories surrounding with, these Vimanas and things of that nature that come from ancient India, and whether or not they had these bell-shaped UFOs, and the list just goes on and on and
Studies
on.
in Tibet.
But is it Hitler has plausible deniability in all of this? He just didn't know. He was so wrapped up in the liberation or the supposed liberation of his people that he didn't realize what his constituents were doing? Or is Hitler a willing participant in all of this? By the way, the guy's on Pervitin, which is effectively methamphetamine. We talked to one of our favorite guests, Dr. Jerry Marzinski, clinical psychologist who deals with schizophrenic patients for like 35 years. He said the number one drug associated with displaying signs of schizophrenia, which he has now come to the conclusion is a spiritual disposition. You're being influenced and oppressed by spirits outside of your own self. He says methamphetamine is the number one thing that will kick that door open and give those spirits access to you, and it becomes very difficult to close them. So you've got a guy on meth standing at the altar of Zeus.
Even before he was like on meth, there's a story from I think when he was in the World War I.
His sister. I actually have this pulled up here. So this is one of these things. His sister Paula writes a sort of a manuscript for a magazine. I think it was a 15-page manuscript, and within it she talks about her brother. And there's this little snippet where she talks about him giving in or taking guidance from a voice. You can call it intuition or otherwise. He believed it was like the voice of God. He called it providence. And then there's this lore, and it's hard to confirm it, that kind of builds Hitler up. And it's this idea that like this voice is divinely guiding him, even to the extent where he has this inclination at one point from the voice to step to the side as an incoming missile, right? Lands, and it takes out the homies that he's hanging out with, and he just so happens to have sidestepped it just in time. So, further bolstering the lore, the sort of cryptic lore of Hitler, you start to look at this, and it's anecdotal, albeit, and there's a lot of plausible deniability and ways to kind of squirm out of it. But it looks to me like this is not a guy who is an unknowing participant in this? It seems to me like this is something he is fascinated by and is engaging with.
Yeah, again, that is a good question. I mean, there does seem to be these kind of perennialist undertones that I've seen in Mein Kampf, but I'm not a historian of World War II. I've just read several books on it, and I look at the ethos of the mythology that Rosenberg crafted, and it's definitely a return to the idea of pagan Rome, something like that, and Rome just kind of adopted the same pantheon that the Greeks had. So I could definitely see that, that Zeus element that you talked about. That's definitely there. Zeus obviously isn't the same as the biblical deity. So once you understand that, Christianity has to be exclusionist, because Christ said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me." So you can't have, like Pope Francis and Leo say, all the religions and all the paths going to take you to the one God. And Hitler also tried to make alliances with Islam as well. If you look up his meetings with Amin al-Husseini, who was the British intelligence operative that was the Grand Imam of Jerusalem, that was a British spy who was placed there to kind of have this continual backdoor discussion with Hitler throughout these periods, as well as the Royal Society meeting with Ribbentrop consistently throughout that time. Keep in mind too that Blavatsky and theosophy was also promoted by the Rothschilds, right? The Fabian Society and all that's getting a lot of Rothschild money, and that's where you get theosophy. Madame Blavatsky was a Fabian socialist, so she was talking to a lot of the KGB people like Roerich and others. She would go and have these meetings with the ascended masters and all this kind of stuff, which I'm not saying she wasn't contacting demons, but Dr. Richard Spence is a really good historian on a lot of this stuff. And we did an interview on Secret Agent 666, which is about Crowley's work with British intelligence. And he wrote another essay about how her ascended masters might have also been some of her handlers. So spy handlers, in other words. So there's this espionage element that's important to understand as well, because whether it's the Reich or whether it's the Fabian socialists or whether it's the Bolsheviks, many of them were into the occult. Gleb Bokyai is another famous Bolshevik who was an outright sort of straight up Satanist, eyes wide shut kind of guy. He was having eyes wide shut orgies. So there's also Pink. I don't know if you've heard of that book, but that's the Skittles stuff going on amongst some of the SS. Which is that?
Odd. What is it? Wait. What do you mean the Skittles stuff?
Talking about the jacket stuff?
I don't know.
Talking about stuff.
Oh, they're doing. Yeah, I mean that's the rumor. I mean that there's these rumors that Hitler himself was a. And I wonder, what do you make of that, and what do you make of the idea that he was a Rothschild?
It's interesting. I mean, you just touched on this idea of Blavatsky talking to her ascended masters, I guess, whoever David Icke was talking to. Shout out David Icke,
yeah.
But it was possibly her handlers as well, and then that leads
voice
into
to skull technology.
Yeah, because all that stuff is patented right at the same time.
Yeah.
I had like dental tooth implants. The different MK Ultra techniques are patented around like the 1950s.
So for sure they have some working before they patent it.
It gets very confusing on what is supernatural, extraterrestrial, and what is just government influence doing things and saying it.
I love the idea that everything that David Icke is talking about actually was just some spooks.
We like David Icke.
I like David Icke, but number one, he's very grumpy lately. And number two, I just it's a fundamental question that I have for him, which is so much of this in his own admission comes from channeling these through a Kundalini awakening.
What's that, like butt stuff, right?
Stuff, yeah. Because that's how the Kundalini starts in the, and then if you keep it there long enough, it moves north, and then you have an awakening, and then he channels these ascended Atlantean masters, and then they tell him all this stuff, and I'm like, fun stuff. A lot of what you're saying, really interesting, really compelling. I could see what you're talking about. Have you ever considered that they lied to you?
Call
Ian
Carroll.
So it's like, dude, that whole thing is really I love that idea. She thinks it's the ascended Atlantean masters. Really, it's spooks shooting lasers at her head. That's fantastic.
Why not all of these things?
Why not all of these things? What do you think about this idea, though, that Hitler himself was a Rothschild?
Yeah, what if the ascended masters are just like catty demons?
Well, that's what I kind of suspect is the case, dog. I think that
what if they lie, right? What if it's lying dudes that are just ascended like spirits?
Honestly, I think that's what all this is, where they're like, Jesus is going to come back as a Pleiadian wearing like blue spandex. I was like, what if you're talking to somebody that's just...
Yo, you know what's crazy, by the way, though? That
Have
guy
you
that you're
considered?
talking about, did he block you?
No, but I'm a
He
big
blocked
fan.
me.
I'm a big fan. I'm like, I hope he keeps more of this because I like it. It's
That
like,
guy, I talked about him on the Raven, and I never even interacted with him, dog. Somehow it got to him that I talked about him, yesterday morning. And he's blocked me, and now I don't have access to engaging with his content anymore, but I still get to see it because the way Twitter works. But yeah, dude, I think you're right on the money. Is like this it's a simple question, because if I heard a voice and I wasn't like overwhelmingly...
he blocked me now,
oh, good,
too.
all right, good.
Yeah.
You deserve it. I don't deserve it, dude. I was just saying it was that if I had an experience with what I felt was God, then maybe that would... But that's not even what David Icke is claiming. He's like, no, dude, these are just ascended Atlantean masters. And I'm like,
Cheetah 5 cents reality. Yep.
and you're not wondering if they're lying to you, dude. You're
Right.
not... I mean, it's how long have we experienced this thing where it's like they'll tell you a tremendous amount of truth and then some really fundamental, really important lies about the nature of things, and that's where everything deviates.
Well, they actually say in this Changing Images of Man book, right, so that the religion of the future that's coming will include channeling of entities and spirits to get information about how to conduct like our future government. I mean, we showed it on that episode of Alex, but here's a chart, and you can see right here. It's like, yeah, just channel the spirits. This is like,
oh yeah,
graduate
demons
level
next to it.
Yeah, right. Graduate level.
Circled it and said demons.
That's
Graduate
interesting.
level
One of our like topics of exploration is the telepathy tapes, and that seemed like a primer for channeling, or at least like, I mean, they're calling it telepathy, but realistically, it is kind of like, it's like a bunch of autistic kids telling us how to run our government. Everyone comes back with the same message of like, there's going to be a global catastrophe, whatever they're saying about the what's that called?
Polar shift,
the Intergalactic Federation,
Galactic Federation of Homosexuality. And by the way, for the audience, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, for the audience, we're gonna have on Pastor Joe and Franco on the show soon. I'm actually talking to him. We're text buddies now.
Oh, cool.
And he is one of the pastors that worked on the telepathy tapes, and he said they cut out a tremendous amount of footage, and all of that footage had one thing in common. It was the children talking about Jesus Christ. And I'm not saying that they were talking to the Jesus Christ. If they were talking to some demon posing as a Pleiadian, demon Christ, Jesus Christ, something like that, I don't know. But it's interesting to me that, what's her name? Kat, the chick who made the whole, whatever her name is, she's lesbian. It's interesting to me that she, removed all of that from the story. And even though this guy worked on it, and there was all this content surrounding that particular topic.
Well, there are a lot of little tidbits, like the Indian kid was claiming to be in contact with some of these like ancient deities of their Hindu religion, and the mother kind of wanted to, wisely kind of dissuaded him from connecting more with
don't
this.
Talk to those
Don't talk to those guys. That's not a good look. But there's something there. There's something that it immediately raised alarm bells, because that new religion you're talking about that's going to be coming into the fold, that's what it's going to be all about.
Yeah.
It's some sort of telepathic communication,
channeling.
or
it's channeling every time.
whatever.
It's the Ennead, it's the Egyptian Ennead, it's this, it's that, it's the Pleiadians. Shout out to the Pleiadians. But yeah, I mean, that's where we're going.
You guys should reach out and do an interview with Dr. Richard Spence, because he knows a lot about the espionage angle of Blavatsky and Crowley. His book Secret Agent 666 is really, really good on all that, and he knows how to tie it into like the occult side of spying and all that too.
Okay, cool. I got him here. I'm gonna save this tab. Yeah, it's a huge part of where we're going. I was saying on the show that I was doing the other morning, where it's like, I think these encounters used to omit Christ in very many ways, because they've been going on for a really long time. But I think, especially now, and Christian nationalism ties heavily into this discussion, especially when it comes to the whole Hitler admiration thing. But at the very least, what you could say is there's been this awareness and this gearing towards the American consciousness towards Christ, and I think there's some parsing out that needs to be done.
We're in strange territory for sure, and I think it relates like it's a 1-to-1 correlation of what's happening now between the idea of bringing Hitler back in this fantastical view, Nick Fuentes gaining the prominence. I think that the prominence that he does deserve, he shouldn't have been canceled the way he does, but it's no surprise that he is now moving the way he is now, especially after Charlie Kirk's death. So
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk dies, there's this resurgence of what I can only explain as like Christian nationalism that's kind of like peaking in the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing, you know, their big mega church thing at his memorial or funeral. At the same time, Nick Fuentes is sort of taking the baton and moving in a different direction of whatever Charlie was doing. Maybe I don't even know.
Well, it's weird because this Christian nationalism that is emerging seems to be one that is like spiteful. Like
it can get easily mixed up.
Yeah,
with
it's birthed out of hatred for like the other side, which is not necessarily. I don't think that that's the direction that we should be going. And I think a lot of people would be subscribing to this Christian nationalism not out of submission to God and this acceptance of Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, but instead as a way to stick it to the other side that we've been,
And this is specifically hard to navigate because I think this show, even though it has like some colorful language or whatever, what we're trying to do is lead people to Christ and tell people about God. And in a way, when this comes up, this flavor of Christian nationalism, I kind of don't want people to go towards this. So now I'm like working against my own endeavors here.
Yeah. Well, it's
very
hard.
confusing.
Well, and before we depart from this, I just want to say, and then I'll pass the ball to you, Jay. I don't know which way we're going to go with this, but that whole, the occult new age movement, whatever, used to omit Christ, now is forced to incorporate it because I think so many people are coming towards Jesus that they're like, okay, this is a thing that we need to figure out how to steer. So now you're getting crap like Pleiadian Jesus in blue scrubs with silver boots, right? That's the story that we were reading. That's the guy that you're talking about.
That's the easy stuff, though. That's
but there's
fun.
a lot of that. It's like now. And then you get the whole Gnostic thing of Jesus was an ascended master. He's just like Buddha. He had a Kundalini awakening, yada, yada, yada. The list goes on and on and on.
You get into the weird stuff. Jay encountered it the other day. It's like Jesus was actually from, like he was Irish or something like that. And the white people were the real. And then it starts to get strange. And then you get into race identity. And we're like, all right, what are we doing here, guys?
It feels like they're like, we need to, this isn't going away. We need to muddy it a lot. So I don't know. Thoughts, Jay?
Yeah, I think that you have to, who Jesus is and the Jesus of history is the Jesus in the church. Like you can't divorce who he is from the church that he established. And we believe that he established a church in history. So when the apostles go out, they set up sees, SEES, in the Roman Empire, and you get the bishops that succeed from those different sees. If you read Paul's letters to Timothy, he talks about laying hands on Timothy, passing on the gift of the Holy Spirit. And he tells Timothy not to hastily lay hands on men after him, but to pick good dudes, solid dudes to pass that gift on to, much like you see in Numbers 11, when, you have Moses laying hands on the elders, passing the Spirit, when you have, at the end of Genesis, Joseph and the blessing in Genesis. There's this biblical model of the passing on through the laying on of hands of the gift or the inheritance, which in the New Testament is fulfilled in the gift of the Holy Spirit. So anything that departs from that confession that you see in history, because we think Jesus promised the Holy Spirit to guide the church and that he would never leave it, in John 14-16. So this presence of the Holy Spirit in the life of the church makes the church also a theandric institution, which just means a God-man or the body of the God-man institution. So it's not a social organization. It's not a political organization. It's something totally unique to history. It's a supernatural organism in our view. And so, when you go back to like the Nicene Creed and this kind of stuff, like there's not really any Christianity that departs from that. Like it's not Christianity, it's some sort of deviation. And all the Gnostic stuff, all the sort of neo-pagan stuff, it's really going against mischaracterizations of what Christianity is. For example, with the Hitler stuff, the reason people are looking to that kind of a based so-called a leader is like, we haven't seen a based leader or what the Christian doctrine of the state actually is in practice in our generation. It doesn't exist. And when you go throughout church history, you have countless examples of Christian kings who were opposed to Zionism, opposed to rabbinical Talmudic philosophy, who fought Islam, countless Orthodox Christian kings, especially in Serbia, who went to battle against Islam. So there is this genuine masculine, kingly, heroic, patriarchal archetype that still exists all throughout Orthodox iconography, the last of which would be Tsar Nicholas, who was murdered by the Bolsheviks in a Talmudic ritual. That has been banished, and people don't have any conception of this. So the deficient nature of Western Christianity, for the most part, when it seeks for cultural and political and social solutions, it naturally then wants to gravitate towards the last thing that it thinks or remembers in its cultural memory as so-called bays, and that would be Tiny Mustache Man. But the reality is that he was brought into power by Western industrial money. They wanted a war. This war led to the repatriation of to the Middle East by design, and there was agreement between the Nazis and the called the Havara Agreement, so that Palestine could be set up. And after World War II, you wouldn't have the nation state if you'd not had Tiny Mustache Man wreaking havoc and killing, by the way, millions and millions of Orthodox Christians and Russian Christians, Polish Christians, who were fighting against him not because they were just simply communists. They didn't appreciate the attitude that Hitler had, especially towards the Slavs. If you read in Mein Kampf, he sees them as lesser people very clearly. So we would say, as Orthodox, and many Orthodox Christian saints said, that the movement of Napoleon against Russia and Hitler against Russia were actually actions of the spirit of Antichrist. So just because you're against, you could find a Roman emperor who didn't like, does that mean that he's good because he didn't like, well, I mean, being a Roman emperor and wanting to be worshipped and seeing yourself as a sort of a god figure doesn't make you necessarily based. I mean, unless you just hate Christianity, as many of the Wignats do. But I mean, yeah, there's a combination of things there that make it very difficult, and that's why people are turning to this created meme icon, which I believe is a replacement for real kingly iconography. If you look at what I posted on my Twitter the other day, I put two saints, one from the King of Serbia, Saint Stephen, who fought against Muslims, and then another one was the Romanovs, who didn't like. So you've got these images in our Christian civilization that are opposed to these things, and you can go back to Byzantium. It's the same ideology, the same system, but you're not supposed to talk about any of that. You're only supposed to talk about, I don't know, Tiny Mustache Man or whatever. Yeah, that's it.
There you go.
That's it. That's an actually, it clarifies a lot, because I'm left in this situation where I'm looking at we're looking at the state of the world, the state of America, and we're like, clearly we do need some sort of a strongman. I have the proclivity to deny whatever strongman will rise up from the movement that's happening now, because it seems like the fruit is a little bit tainted.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that, when you ask, like, I don't know, Christian, just your regular Christian person, we go to a Pentecostal church, so obviously my family's like that. They're like, we're just waiting on Jesus, like rely on God. And I'm like, yeah, that's good, but there's stuff happening now, and I got kids in the world, so like, what it's just like it's a weird conundrum for me. Like, what should I be aimed at? Should we be looking to galvanize some sort of a movement that actually is a Christian movement, a Christian nation, maybe like somewhere along the lines of like the guy Joel Webbin seems like to kind of, I haven't paid as much attention to him as I should have, but he seems kind of like be pushing in that direction, or just faith-based, which I'm definitely, I'm not leaning towards it, but I'm trying my best to do that as well.
And I think that this actually goes along with what you're saying. I was going to ask, what you would say to people who say Christianity is a Jewish psyop meant to sort of lull you into complacency.
Well, Judeo-Christianity certainly is.
Well, I mean, but there are people that look at like Jesus Christ and this idea of Christianity as like pacifism. And they would say that Christianity, the point of it is so that you can be taken over effectively, because because of its tenets.
Well, they'll say like Jesus will come back with to rule with a rod of iron. It's like, but we're waiting for him to do that. It's like, well, should we be waiting just for that? Like, well, are we to not gain dominion of this blessing that we've been given in the meantime, or should we just kind of just wait around and whatever happens?
Well, the answers are already in church history. If you look at the first 3 centuries when the church is persecuted by the Roman beast, It takes a few million martyrs before the empire gets Christianized, and it does successfully get Christianized. I believe that's a fulfillment of Daniel 2, because it says that the empire under which the Messiah is born would eventually be taken over by his kingdom. Jesus said that the church is the kingdom, Matthew 16. The church expands and it is given to the Gentiles, Matthew 21:43 at the first advent. So if you look at all the passages in the New Testament when it cites Psalm 110 about the ascension is what happened in Acts. That's when he begins his reign. Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. So you're absolutely right about that. Dominion mandate is actually now given to the church. The church takes dominion by converting the nations. It's not primarily political. There is a side effect, a down the stream effect of conversion of the empire does eventually affect the politics, and you get Christian law. As Orthodox, we believe that Justin was Saint Justinian is a saint, and he put out the Code of Justinian, which is a famous historic Christian law document that makes Christian laws. So all the Orthodox kings that we talked about also had the same modus operandi, the same principle of enacting Christian laws. But it's not that we do politics first. So in our perspective as Orthodox, we believe that as the nation permeates with Christianity, Orthodox Christianity in particular, when it's the majority, they can then begin to pass the Christian laws, right? You're going to outlaw things like blasphemy. You're not going to have all this nonsense. I believe in Orthodox Christian monarchy. That's the best form of government. But that's not our first priority, right? The early church, they didn't go out to try to make sure that Caesar and the senators converted to make Rome be Christian. They converted in an organic sort of way, and then eventually it permeated the empire, and it took a few centuries. And in the West, in America, it's a similar situation. I think we're kind of in a pagan society, basically. But through the internet, things like that, we might actually see a quicker type of conversion and permeation of authentic Christianity. It's not going to be this megachurch nonsense, but people are going to be looking for the historic form of Christianity. What was Christianity like for the first 1,000 years? And I think that's what people find interesting in what we talk about. I'm not attacking or dissing you guys or doubting your sincerity or anything like that. But, I was Protestant, raised Protestant, and then reading church history and reading the church fathers and all that kind of led me in this direction. So that kind of a Christianity already has a doctrine of the state. And I think what you get with people like Joel Webbin, and I remember I used to be in a Calvinist church, kind of like what Joel Webbin's in. And we were kind of
he's a Calvinist? I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. I'm not talking to him. I just think I'm not positive, but I think what those kind of groups are kind of searching for, well, what is the relationship of church and state? It's kind of already been answered, in Orthodoxy already has 2,000 years of how you go about symphonia, which is the double-headed eagle. It's not a Masonic symbol. You got one body, which is the people, church and state working together in harmony. It's not perfect. You're going to have corrupt church leaders. You're going to have corrupt politicians. But the ideal is when Christianity permeates, you do have Christian laws.
Orthodoxy was something that I was looking into. It turns out that where I moved, the nearest one was like over an hour away, and I'm like, I can't do that. Dude.
We go to the same church now.
I like the Pentecostals because every time they start speaking in tongues, I get to look around.
I go, this is weird. Happening? But it is. I don't think that God only resides in one spot. I think if you call him, he's omnipresent. So it's just a place that I go to on Sunday, but really the church is kind of like what we're doing here at this coffee shop. I'm excited if you'll be able to make it down, but it's like there's a Christian library in the back, and the owner, Matt Hepner, is a guy that we talk to. We do Bible studies with this guy. So we're talking about the Bible. We're talking about God, and the people that walk into this shop, there's just varying perspectives, and we're able to actually do church every single day rather than one denomination where
I just show up once a week. And
I can't drive an hour and a half to.
Like I said, that was the first thing I looked at when I came down here or up here, and I was like, dang.
Well, the good news is the Orthodoxy is spreading. So, for example, many of the churches I've talked to, the priests and bishops, and they're all talking about everything is tripled in size in the last couple of years. So that means that there will be more and more mission parishes and whatnot being set up. But you guys are welcome to come to our conference November 21, 22nd. If you want to come over to Palm Coast, we're having a 2-day Orthodox conference. So we've already got about 150 people coming. You guys are welcome to show up.
That would be dope. I would love to do
that. You guys can go for free, by the way. You can come for free. Okay.
That's awesome.
dude.
Yeah, after the
Yeah, that'd
show,
be
we'll
cool.
get the information. That'd be very cool.
We should actually begin to wrap up now. I want to respect Jay's time.
Well,
I know we had
want
to
to.
start
Do you have a
early.
question? Because if
Oh,
not,
yeah,
then
we
we'll
have a
jump to
big question
The
for
final
him.
one.
Yeah.
The final one, the most important one.
Yeah.
Jay, this is something that we've begun to close all of our shows with, and it always turns out to be a fun question that
I knew it was gonna be
the
something
answers are
crazy.
always like really interesting.
No, that's nothing crazy.
no, it's definitely
What
nothing
color
crazy.
are your underwear, Jay?
I was on some podcast and they asked
Oh, you
You
muted.
just
You
muted.
muted.
You just muted. You said you were on some podcast and what?
You muted,
still
man. You got to
muted.
touch the mic.
The fingers go pow, 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 pow.
Yeah, he's got that Shure, the newer Shure, and when he touches it, it's like a.
Oh,
he
it's like
mutes
a
it.
sensor or a
Yeah,
button
yeah.
on it. Yeah, Jay, we lost you there. You've been muted the
yeah,
whole time.
I
You
was
said
on
you-
some podcast and it was some weird final question. What's your favorite sex position? It's just some weird question.
No.
No,
That's not it.
that's gross.
This one
dude.
pertains, I
That's gay.
suppose. Go ahead.
Not in this episode. Okay, if you say yes. Just in everything that you're doing. Are you having fun?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I would not trade any of this for what I was trying to do, which was, academia. I was going to try to be a professor. And like I told you guys, the graduate advisor was like, yeah, well, you're a straight white male. You're probably not welcome here. And I remember saying to him, well, I guess I'll go, I don't know, start a blog and do a podcast. And he actually laughed. He was like, good luck with that. But that was back in like the late 2000s when that was kind of not really, it wasn't, everybody was doing podcasts at that time. And I remember he was specifically, and he wasn't laughing. He was laughing in a shitty way, like, you won't make it. You know what I mean? I was like, well, we'll see about that. So, but he was that weirdo creep that he didn't ever like touch my, but the word was he tried to sleep with the young dudes on campus. So yeah, I'm just like, yeah, whatever, dude.
Hey, man, all these things work out a certain way, right? Like, I guess, I don't know if
Exactly.
you believe in it this way, but God will close a door and he'll slam it shut in your face. And you'll sit there wondering, like, why the hell I thought I was supposed to do a thing.
Right.
And it's just not that thing, not this place, not right now. And I think you're in the right spot, dude.
Oh yeah, that's obvious. You're in your element, and it's good to see. I mean, I nowadays I feel like I see you everywhere, and that's why whenever
Oh, by the way, congratulations! I saw like the latest clip that you put up where he's like he converted like you got it like 20 N-word passes.
Dude, you got
Dude, where's my
24
air
N-word
horn?
passes.
Yeah,
That's
it's
awesome,
up in the
dude.
20s, so I can say right now, right? That's one of them. Is that one of them? Okay, now it's down to 23.
23.
also,
yeah, 23.
Also, Esther Hollywood 3 is out, right? So you guys can get.
Yeah.
Very
So
nice.
I've
very
written
nice.
over 1,000 pages on film analyses now. So this is the completion of the trilogy. It just arrived a couple days ago. So you guys can get signed copies of that at the website. Also in Tampa, we'll be at Tampa for the Tampa Bay Screams Horror Convention costume party in October 30th. And
30th.
Oh, that's like now.
Jamie reached out and it's like it's so far. I was like, I can't make it. You guys aren't going to want to drive 2 additional hours. Of course, we'd love to have you.
no, but you guys are on the way. Like we can go to what'd you say, lady fingers, or where is
I
it?
thought Lady Fingers. Look at Sam Hyde.
Lady Lake.
I
Lady
thought
Lake.
you were south of us.
No,
I don't know. Florida's an enigma.
no,
yeah,
we live
Florida's
we're in
confusing.
St. Augustine, so we drive down to you and then to Tampa.
Well, that day wouldn't work anyway because we have, quite frankly, show and we have Owen Benjamin coming on.
Well, what I'm saying is,
Oh, you guys love Owen Benjamin. You should-
what I'm saying is, I can meet up with you guys on the way back or on the way down. That's what I'm
That would be cool. On the way back could work out. And okay, so look, I don't know if we're going to end up doing this, but if you're listening to this show, maybe we could figure out something where we use the space in the back. We do a little bit of book signing.
You guys aren't even that far. We can do this at any time.
Dude, I am so confused about where you are.
You don't know where St. Augustine is?
I thought St. Augustine. Maybe I'm thinking of St.
embarrassing. I don't know.
Petersburg. St. Petersburg is super south. It's more south of Tampa. So maybe that's
to
what
be
I'm
honest, we're probably
No, we're
closer to the
north of
Orthodox
you.
Church than we think.
Dude, how far are you from Orlando?
an
hour?
hour north of Orlando.
Okay, then you are closer to me than you're like an hour from me.
What?
Maybe
Yeah.
he's right by the church that we were looking at.
He's probably that's why he's going to the church and it's easy
Imagine
for him.
we would have accidentally
You guys
went there
are
and
an hour
Jay's
from me.
there.
We should just meet up and do some podcasts like at any time.
Dude,
yeah,
I didn't even know this was a
we've
thing.
got a studio here. We're building a great community that would vibe with what you're
yeah, that'd
doing.
be
Oh,
great.
absolutely, man. You would love it here,
Yeah.
and people would come out to come.
What's it
I'm
called?
glad that because
Lady Lake?
It's called Lady Lake. Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's the villages. It's where all the
Yeah.
old people have all the STDs. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, this humping old people. I know where that is.
Yeah, dude. We picked that on purpose.
Yeah, we're out here, dog. We're
Yeah.
cleaning it
Oh,
up.
now I know what's up. Yeah. Okay.
All right, Jay. Thanks for coming on, man. This is great. Always love talking to Jay, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Any parting words for us, man?
You
Well,
guys
how
are-
about where the heck people can find you?
You guys are technically just 2 hours away. I could come at any time. That's nothing. So yeah.
Awesome.
easy.
Okay,
Oh,
we'll
that's
we'll
good
work out
news,
some
dude.
odds and ends for you. All right, yeah, dude. It's been a great episode. Until next time, don't
All right.
forget to obey, submit, and comply. We'll